What the hell are you doing here? The venom-laced voice ripped through the night air like a gunshot. Get your filthy self back to whatever gutter you crawled out from before I call security to drag you out. The words poured from Maxwell Crane's mouth, each syllable dripping with centuries of inherited hate. His towering frame loomed over Naomi Carter, who stood frozen near the shimmering pool of the Fairmont Grand Hotel, her midnight blue gown catching the glow of chandeliers from the ballroom behind her. You don't belong with civilized people. Know your damn place, he roared, his voice echoing across the terrace. Before anyone could react, Crane's manicured hands shot forward and violently shoved Naomi backward. Gasps erupted as her body cut through the air, then crashed into the pool with a thunderous splash. Water exploded upward like shattered glass. Naomi disappeared beneath the surface, her elegant gown swirling around her like a broken dream. Phones lifted instantly. Dozens of guests, their mouths agape, captured the billionaire's racist assault on camera. Shock gripped the terrace as ripples distorted Naomi's reflection in the water. When she resurfaced, gasping and trembling, mascara streamed down her face like black rivers, her expression caught between fury and disbelief. Crane adjusted his tuxedo, smug and unbothered. Maybe now you'll remember your place, he said coldly, his smirk slicing the silence. The crowd murmured in outrage, torn between decency and cowardice. But what Maxwell Crane didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the woman he had just humiliated held the power to destroy everything he had built. Her calm beneath that chaos wasn't weakness. It was precision, because in exactly 23 minutes, the empire that had stood for 3 generations would start collapsing, brick by brick, tweet by tweet, boardroom by boardroom. 3 days earlier, the first crack in Crane's world had already begun to form. The morning sun stretched across downtown Atlanta, gilding its skyline in molten gold. Inside a sleek glass office overlooking the city, Elias Carter stood behind his mahogany desk, reviewing contracts that could change the course of his company and his life. At 38, he had built TechFlow Industries from nothing but vision and persistence. His reflection in the glass wall stared back, calm, calculating, and hungry for victory. But today, one document made his pulse quicken. The header read, Crane Corporation Strategic Partnership Proposal, $1.2 billion. The deal of a lifetime, the kind that made kings out of dreamers. Elias's revolutionary artificial intelligence platform had already captured the attention of America's biggest corporations. But Maxwell Crane, the old money real estate mogul fighting to stay relevant, had been the most desperate suitor, flying down from New York twice in the last month, dangling increasingly outrageous offers. "Baby, you're going to be late for lunch," came a warm, confident voice from the doorway. Naomi Carter stepped in, radiant in a tailored navy suit, the kind that said she owned any room she entered. Behind her, her framed Harvard law diploma gleamed beneath the office lights, a quiet reminder of the power couple they had become. Elias smiled as she walked toward him. "Just reviewing Crane's final proposal," he said. "He's desperate for our AI. His empire's bleeding money. Without predictive analytics, Crane Corporation's done in 6 months." Naomi skimmed the contract, her eyes sharp and deliberate. "He's offering nearly double what your tech's worth," she observed, brow arching. "That tells me one thing, he's drowning." Elias chuckled softly. "Exactly. He needs us more than we need him." Crane Corporation still owned a massive share of Atlanta's commercial real estate, but its foundations were rotting. Arrogance had replaced innovation. They were running out of time, and everyone knew it. "I'm meeting him tonight at the Children's Education Foundation Gala," Elias said, slipping his phone into his pocket. "He's hosting it at the Fairmont Grand Hotel. He wants to finalize everything in person." Naomi frowned slightly. "I still don't trust him. His background check was full of quiet settlements, discrimination claims, contracts pulled from minority-owned businesses. The man's reputation reeks of hidden prejudice." Elias nodded, his tone measured. "I know, but prejudice gets humbled when bankruptcy comes knocking." Across town, in his marble-pillared mansion, Maxwell Crane paced his office like a predator in a shrinking cage. Financial reports littered his antique desk, each one worse than the last. His voice broke the silence. "Helen," he snapped. His longtime assistant, Helen Drake, appeared nervously at the doorway. "Sir, the Carter contract is ready for tonight." Crane's jaw tightened. The idea of depending on a black entrepreneur for salvation made his stomach twist. His grandfather had built this empire on exclusion, and now he was begging for help from the very people he'd been taught to despise. "Make sure everything is perfect at the gala," he said coldly. "Tonight, I take back control." Helen nodded quietly. She had worked for him long enough to recognize the danger in his tone, that volatile blend of pride, fear, and denial. That evening, Elias adjusted his black tuxedo while Naomi fastened her diamond earrings in the mirror. Her midnight blue gown hugged her frame elegantly, her beauty both soft and commanding. "Ready to make history?" she asked, a knowing smile on her lips. Elias grinned, straightening his tie. "Always." Neither of them knew that within 72 hours, that same ballroom would become the stage of Atlanta's most scandalous downfall, a public humiliation that would end a dynasty and ignite a revolution. Because power, when mixed with prejudice, always finds a way to destroy itself. The Fairmont Grand Hotel glowed against the Atlanta skyline like a crown made of light and glass. Valets in crisp uniforms ushered in an endless parade of black cars. Photographers flashed bulbs at the arrivals. Politicians, CEOs, socialites, all dressed in diamonds and deception. Inside, the Children's Education Foundation gala shimmered with excess. Crystal chandeliers rained gold over champagne glasses, and a string quartet floated music through the air like perfume. Deals were being brokered between smiles, and gossip whispered behind every compliment. Then came the couple everyone had been waiting for. Elias and Naomi Carter stepped out of their sleek black Tesla, their poise commanding every glance. Conversations paused. Heads turned. He was the tech visionary rewriting the rules of business. She, the Harvard-trained attorney who exuded quiet power. Together, they were elegance and disruption personified. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, welcome," said the hotel manager, smiling brightly. "Mr. Crane has been asking about your arrival every 10 minutes. Naomi's brow arched subtly. "Of course he has," she murmured. The ballroom was a sea of gold and glass. Oil paintings lined the walls, each worth more than most homes, while white orchids perfumed the air. Waiters glided past carrying crystal trays of caviar and champagne. The gala wasn't about charity. It was about power wrapped in silk. Near the mahogany bar, Maxwell Crane held court, surrounded by the city's most influential figures: Judge Warren Hale, Senator Vivian Cross, and Bank President Charles Denton. Together, they looked like the guardians of a fading empire. "There's our golden goose," Crane muttered under his breath as he spotted Elias across the room. His knuckles whitened around his glass. "Let's close this deal before he grows a conscience." He approached with his signature smile, practiced, perfect, poisonous. "Elias, Naomi, so wonderful you could make it tonight," he said warmly, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. His handshake lingered a heartbeat too long. Elias smiled politely. "Wouldn't miss it. I trust you've reviewed our final proposal?" Crane asked, the charm barely concealing his urgency. "Very generous terms," Elias replied evenly. "But I'm still considering all my options." That sentence made Crane's jaw twitch. "Surely you understand the mutual benefits," he pressed. "My global network could launch your AI worldwide within a year." Elias nodded slightly, his expression unreadable. Global reach means little without shared values. For a fraction of a second, Crane's facade faltered. The smile stayed, but his eyes darkened. Of course," he said, waving over a waiter. "Let's toast to opportunity." "Darling," Naomi said softly, sensing the shift, "I'm going to get some air." She turned gracefully, the midnight blue gown rippling like water as she crossed the ballroom toward the terrace. Several men watched her leave. Their wives pretended not to notice. Crane's gaze followed her like a shadow. "Beautiful wife you have," he said casually, the undertone sharp enough to cut glass. though I imagine the corporate world can be challenging for people like her. Elias's smile froze. Naomi graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law, he said calmly. She's more qualified than most people here, including some sitting on your board. Crane raised his hands in mock surrender. No offense meant, just a comment on tradition. Some circles don't change easily. Then maybe it's time they did, Elias replied, his tone ice cold. For a flicker of a moment, Crane's mask slipped. The smile evaporated, revealing raw resentment. Then just as quickly it returned. "Excuse me," he said curtly, turning back toward the bar. At the counter, his inner circle leaned in, voices low but dripping with contempt. "Desperate times call for desperate measures," muttered Judge Hale. "Can't believe you're groveling for help from them." "The world's upside down," added Senator Cross, clutching her champagne. "They buy their way into our circles and think it makes them equals." Crane drained his glass, his voice rough with fury. "Maybe my grandfather had the right idea about keeping order." Their laughter was the sound of snakes. Soft, cruel, poisonous. Outside, Naomi Carter stood by the pool, the skyline reflected in its calm surface. She didn't know it yet, but the air behind her was changing. The wolves were leaving the ballroom, and their prey was waiting in the moonlight. Because when masks finally fall, monsters never hide for long. The cool night air kissed Naomi Carter's skin as she stood by the pool, the city lights of Atlanta reflecting in the water like liquid fire. The ballroom's noise faded behind her, laughter, clinking glasses, and hollow words lost in the distance. Out here, everything felt clearer. The stars above, the ripples below, and the uneasy quiet in between. She unlocked her phone and glanced at a message from her firm. An update on a discrimination case against one of Atlanta's biggest construction companies. The irony wasn't lost on her. She spent her days defending the marginalized. Yet tonight, she was surrounded by the very architects of oppression. Inside the ballroom, Maxwell Crane gripped the bar, knuckles pale beneath the weight of his fury. The alcohol burned down his throat, but not fast enough to quiet the voice of failure whispering in his head. Elias Carter's calm defiance replayed in his mind, and Naomi's composure, that unshakable grace, gnawed at him. To Maxwell, it wasn't confidence, it was rebellion. "Gentlemen," he muttered to Judge Warren Hale, Senator Vivian Cross, and Charles Danton, "let's get some air." They followed without hesitation, for predators leaving their den, arrogance fueling their stride. Through the glass doors, Naomi's figure stood alone by the glowing pool, framed in moonlight. "Look at her," Judge Hale sneered, "acting like she owns the place." "Probably never seen a pool this nice where she's from," Senator Cross added, laughing behind her glass of champagne. Crane's jaw twitched. He straightened his bow tie like a soldier preparing for battle. "Watch this," he said darkly. "Let's remind her where she truly stands." The group stepped onto the terrace, their polished shoes clicking against the marble tiles. Naomi turned, sensing the shift in air pressure, danger approaching, disguised in tuxedos. Her prosecutor instincts flared. Their movements were coordinated, their energy sharp, and their eyes predatory. "Excuse me, miss," Crane called out, his voice oozing politeness that fooled no one. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." Naomi met his gaze with calm restraint. "I'm Naomi Carter. My husband Elias and I are guests here tonight." "Carter," Crane repeated, letting the name roll off his tongue like an insult. "And what exactly qualifies someone like you to attend an event of this caliber?" Her smile didn't waver. "We're here for the same reason as everyone else, to support the foundation." Charles Danton chuckled. "The sound hollow. Support? That's rich. People like you should be grateful just to stand in this room." "That's enough," Naomi said, her voice cutting through the night. "You've had too much to drink." She stepped forward, but Crane blocked her path. His companions shifted, forming a half-circle that trapped her near the pool's edge. "Not so fast," he sneered. "You really think that dress and those degrees make you one of us? You're a guest in a world that will never be yours." Naomi's pulse raced, but her tone remained ice. "Mr. Crane, step aside before you say something you'll regret." "Regret?" Senator Cross laughed sharply. The only regret is pretending equality exists. Naomi glanced through the ballroom windows. Several guests had stopped talking. Phones were being raised. Every word you're saying, she said softly, is being recorded right now. Crane's face twisted. Let them record, he snapped. Maybe it's time everyone saw what happens when people forget their place. Judge Hale's laughter slithered through the air. You think marrying some tech genius makes you our equal? You'll always be a fraud wrapped in luxury. The laughter grew louder, meaner, crueler. Naomi's heel brushed the edge of the pool. The water shimmered like a silent witness waiting to testify. Crane leaned closer, his breath reeking of champagne and resentment. You want to know your problem? He hissed. You actually think you belong here. But I see right through you, sweetheart. You'll always be ghetto, trash-dressed in borrowed silk. Inside, through the glass doors, Elias Carter was already pushing through the crowd, unaware that in the next 60 seconds, his wife would be fighting for her life and a billion-dollar empire would begin to die. What the hell are you doing here? The words tore out of Maxwell Crane's throat like fire. This isn't a charity for your kind. Get your filthy self back to wherever you crawled from before. I have you dragged out. His voice thundered across the terrace, turning the calm night into chaos. Guests froze mid-conversation, champagne glasses trembling in their hands. Without warning, Crane lunged forward. His hands clamped down on Naomi Carter's shoulders and shoved hard. Her body flew backward, her midnight blue gown catching the light like broken glass before she crashed into the pool. The impact echoed through the night, water exploding upward, screams rising from the crowd. Phones shot up instantly. Dozens of cameras caught the billionaire's assault from every angle. Within seconds, history had begun recording itself. Naomi disappeared beneath the surface. When she resurfaced, gasping, her face streaked with mascara and disbelief, the terrace fell into stunned silence. Crane stood at the pool's edge, fixing his tuxedo with a cold smirk. Maybe now you'll remember your place. And then, the terrace doors flew open. Elias Carter burst through like a force of nature. Get away from my wife. His roar silenced the entire ballroom. Power radiated from him, not just the kind born of wealth, but of raw, righteous fury. Crane's composure cracked instantly. Elias, this is a misunderstanding, he stammered, the words tripping over fear. A misunderstanding? Elias's voice sliced through the air like a blade. You shoved my wife into a pool in front of witnesses. Do you think this is something you can spin? Guests parted as Elias stormed forward, pulling Naomi from the water. His hand trembled as he wrapped his jacket around her. The tenderness in that gesture was a striking contrast to the violence that had just unfolded. Please, Elias, Crane stuttered, desperation breaking through his arrogance. We can fix this. Don't let emotions ruin our partnership. Partnership? Elias's eyes narrowed, his tone icy. You just destroyed it. You've shown exactly who you are. You need me, Crane pleaded, voice cracking. My connections, my network, my global reach. I don't need corruption to reach the world, Elias interrupted coldly. My company's built on integrity, something you'll never understand. Senator Vivian Cross stepped forward nervously. Gentlemen, surely we can resolve this privately. Privately? Elias snapped. You all stood there and watched a man assault my wife. There is nothing private about this anymore. Crane's desperation spiraled. He dropped to his knees on the marble tiles. Please, Elias. My company employs 3,000 people. Families depend on me. Don't destroy everything over one mistake. Elias stared down at him, fury simmering behind control. You did this to yourself. Actions have consequences, Maxwell. Naomi stepped forward now, drenched but composed. There's no misunderstanding here, she said, her voice steady and cutting. This is racism, broadcast live. Gasps rippled across the terrace as guests realized the full weight of what they'd witnessed. The videos were already online, their notifications buzzing through the crowd. Hotel security arrived, led by Marcus Reed, a towering figure in a black suit. Mr. Crane, he said firmly, you need to leave the premises immediately. The hotel maintains zero tolerance for discrimination and assault. Crane's head jerked up in disbelief. You can't throw me out. I hosted this event. Marcus's gaze was steel. And you just ended your career. As security closed in, Elias turned away, holding Naomi close. It's over, he whispered. Naomi met his eyes, calm and unflinching. No, she said quietly. For him, it's just beginning. Because by dawn, the world would see exactly what kind of monster hid behind Maxwell Crane's smile, and his billion-dollar empire would begin to burn. Within minutes, the video hit social media. The sound of Maxwell Crane's voice, his hate-fueled tirade, his shove, Naomi's scream, the splash. It was all there, captured in perfect clarity. By midnight, the world was watching. The hashtag spread like wildfire. Hashtag Poolgate. Hashtag Justice for Naomi. Hashtag Crane Exposed. Within 20 minutes, the clip had 500,000 views across platforms. Major news outlets picked it up almost instantly. CNN breaking news. Billionaire assaults woman at charity gala. Fox alert. Atlanta business leader under fire for shocking display of racism. MSNBC. Viral video shows socialite's violent outburst. Elias Carter ignored the flood of notifications on his phone. He sat beside Naomi, wrapped in a towel, her hands trembling slightly as the hotel staff brought her warm tea. Mr. Carter, said Dr. Sarah Collins, the hotel's on-call physician, your wife's physically fine. No bruises, but she's in emotional shock. Naomi nodded faintly. I'm fine, she whispered, her voice fragile but fierce. He's the one who's finished. Back inside the ballroom, chaos reigned. Guests whispered in corners, clutching their phones like lifelines. Maxwell Crane's inner circle, Judge Warren Hale, Senator Vivian Cross, and Charles Danton, had vanished into the crowd, pretending they hadn't laughed minutes earlier. Meanwhile, Crane was surrounded by hotel security. Mr. Crane, you need to leave now, said Marcus Reed, standing like a wall between him and the other guests. You can't do this. Crane sputtered, sweat streaking down his temple. I built this gala. My family donated millions to this place. Marcus's tone didn't waver. And tonight, you destroyed everything you built. Leave voluntarily, or the Atlanta police will escort you out. Cameras flashed. Guests murmured. And then it happened. 1,000 lenses focused as the city's most powerful man was marched out like a criminal. Wait, Crane shouted. You'll regret this. All of you. But his words drowned in the symphony of notifications chiming through the room. Alerts, pings, shares. The video had already gone viral. By morning, Crane Corporation's stock price had dropped 18% in after-hours trading. Algorithmic sell-offs triggered automatic dumps. Board members called emergency meetings before sunrise. Helen, Crane barked into his phone as he sat slumped in the back seat of his Bentley. Damage control now. On the other end, Helen Drake, his assistant, sounded panicked. Sir, it's already out of control. The board is furious. Reporters are calling nonstop. Creditors want statements. I'll fix it, Crane said, his voice trembling. I'll pay whoever I have to. I'll sue that woman. Helen's voice cut through. You can't sue her. The video is undeniable. You pushed her. You said everything on camera. For the first time, silence filled the line. Outside the Fairmont Grand Hotel, protesters began to gather before dawn. Hand-painted signs glowed under streetlights. Racism has consequences. Justice for Naomi. By the time the sun rose over Atlanta, the once untouchable Maxwell Crane was trending #1 worldwide. Every headline carried his name and his shame. Inside the Carter penthouse, Naomi stood by the window, watching the city she loved wake to a new day. The streets buzzed with both outrage and support. She turned toward Elias, who was reviewing hundreds of partnership emails pouring in overnight. Every major tech firm wants a meeting, he said quietly. They're all cutting ties with Crane. Naomi's expression hardened. Good. Let them learn what accountability looks like. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a call from a major civil rights organization offering full legal representation. She declined politely. No need, she said. I'll handle him myself. Down the street, Crane's mansion looked like a fortress under siege. News vans lined the gates, reporters shouting questions into microphones. His wife's SUV was gone. His children weren't answering calls. The empire he'd inherited now crumbled with every new headline. When Helen finally reached him again, her voice was low. "Sir, 3 investors just pulled out. 2 major clients terminated contracts. And your lawyers, they're dropping you." Crane's face drained of color. "They can't drop me," he whispered. "I own them." "Not anymore," Helen said softly. "You don't own anyone now." By noon, Maxwell Crane had become a global symbol of downfall, proof that the world was watching, recording, and finally ready to judge. 3 months later, Fulton County Superior Court pulsed with the energy of a city holding its breath. The marble steps overflowed with cameras, signs, and voices, students with handmade posters, business leaders in dark suits, families who knew too well what prejudice could cost. At the center of it all, Naomi Carter walked up the steps with steady grace, flanked by her legal team, yet carrying her own resolve like armor. Inside, the gallery filled to capacity. Reporters lined the back wall, sketch artists sharpened pencils, and the hush that precedes history settled over the room. Across the aisle, Maxwell Crane sat at the defense table in a suit that suddenly looked too large for him. Gone was the swagger. Gone was the curated smile. In its place, a hollowed man studying the ruins of his own choices. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," began lead counsel Michelle Roberts, voice unblinking and precise. "This case is not just about a shove. It is about the scaffolding that made that shove feel natural to the man who committed it, the pattern, the practice, and the culture that said, 'No one will hold me accountable.'" The state's witnesses painted a map of rot. Former employees described silent policies that kept qualified black candidates out of management. Contractor Jerome Whitaker testified how his $50 million bid evaporated the moment Crane learned his firm was minority-owned. Housing developer Patricia Lee Mendez presented emails, delays, lost paperwork, always when the buyer's last name didn't fit the neighborhood's character. Then came the recordings. Helen Drake, the assistant who had endured 15 years of careful distance, took the stand with a calm that shook the room. "I began recording after he told me to keep certain contractors in their place," she said. The audio that followed was indisputable. Crane's voice discussing neighborhood standards, optics, and making sure those bids don't get through. The defense tried to pivot. They called it a terrible moment, an aberration under stress, the words of a man who had too much to drink. They spoke of philanthropy, scholarships, gala invitations, and community development. But their arguments fell apart under the weight of the videos, the emails, the voices that had been ignored until the night the pool water roared. Agent Lila Navarro from the FBI summarized the broader investigation. 2 decades of patterns, hiring, contracts, housing, all tilted by quiet instructions and unspoken lines. The Department of Justice had already issued subpoenas. Civil rights violations were under review. When Naomi Carter took the stand, the entire room leaned forward. She did not raise her voice. She did not linger on the humiliation. She described facts, the approach, the words, the shove, and then she spoke about dignity, about the day-to-day erosion that never makes headlines until a man like Crane hands the world a spectacle. "Accountability isn't revenge," she said evenly. "It's maintenance. It keeps the structure from collapsing on the people who live under it." After closing arguments, Judge Mariah Ellison instructed the jury with clipped clarity. The deliberation lasted 6 hours. When the jurors returned, no one breathed. On the claim of assault and intentional infliction of emotional distress, the foreperson read, "We find in favor of the plaintiff. Compensatory damages, $15 million. Punitive damages, $50 million. A sound rippled through the courtroom. Not cheers, not gasps. Something quieter, heavier. The feeling of a city resetting its spine. Judge Ellison addressed Crane last, her voice level, her eyes steady. "You used wealth to launder prejudice into policy. This judgment says your ledger no longer hides your intent." Outside, the steps erupted. Not with chaos, but with release. Reporters shouted questions. Students cried. Business leaders issued statements they should have made years earlier. Crane Corporation filed for bankruptcy protection within weeks. Assets were listed. Contracts dissolved. Executives resigned by email at dawn. Back at the Carter office, offers poured in, partnerships from Fortune 500s who wanted to be seen with integrity, not just innovation. TechFlow Industries didn't bask. It vetted, it set standards, it moved carefully. Elias declined more invitations than he accepted. Values first, scale second. Naomi redirected settlement funds into the Equal Justice Technology Foundation, a rapid response unit pairing civil rights litigation with data tools that exposed discriminatory patterns in hiring and housing. Cases accelerated. Quiet practices met loud audits. Boardrooms learned a new vocabulary, measurable change. But for all the progress, one more blow waited for Maxwell Crane, and it would come from the one place he'd never suspected. Because tomorrow morning, a voice he once controlled will release the final recording. And with it, the last door between scandal and prison will swing open. The morning after the verdict, Atlanta's skyline shimmered under pale sunlight. Outside Crane Corporation's headquarters, the once polished marble steps were buried under protest signs. The logo above the entrance had already been dismantled, leaving faint outlines of a name that no longer carried power. Inside what used to be the executive boardroom, FBI agents sifted through hard drives, shredders hummed, and silence replaced the buzz of wealth. Maxwell Crane sat in a federal holding cell, pale and sleepless, watching his empire dissolve on the news ticker. His wife had filed for divorce, his children changed their names, and even his former allies were testifying to save themselves. On screen, Helen Drake's voice played for the world, the final recording. Crane's tone was unmistakable, mocking minorities, bragging about influence, boasting that judges, banks, and senators all answered to me. The clip aired for 48 hours straight, dissected on every network. By the third day, the Department of Justice announced formal civil rights and fraud indictments. Across town, the Carter residents glowed with quiet triumph. Naomi stood by the balcony overlooking downtown Atlanta, dressed simply, her reflection calm. He thought humiliation could silence me, she said softly to Elias, who approached with a cup of coffee. Instead, he broadcast his own. Elias smiled faintly. His name became a warning label. TechFlow Industries had tripled in valuation within 6 months. Their AI platform now powered ethical auditing systems for major corporations, ensuring hiring transparency and eliminating bias from recruitment algorithms. Government agencies called it the Carter Standard. Naomi's Equal Justice Technology Foundation grew into the Southeast's most effective civil rights advocacy hub. 200 successful lawsuits, $300 million recovered for victims, and a nationwide mentorship network for young lawyers of color. At the Fairmont Grand Hotel, the same pool where everything began had been renamed the Naomi Carter Reflection Pool. A bronze plaque read, "Where truth rose to the surface." Tourists visited daily, not to mourn scandal, but to honor accountability. Meanwhile, Maxwell Crane, now inmate number 47219, aged rapidly behind concrete walls. His once silver hair turned ghost white, his designer suits replaced by prison orange. Fellow inmates called him Pool Boy. Parole boards denied his requests every time, citing continued narcissistic behavior. The empire he built on arrogance was gone, brick by brick, auctioned to pay settlements. Helen Drake, whose courage had cracked open the truth, published her memoir, Behind the Curtain. My Years Serving a Billionaire Bigot. It topped bestseller lists for months, funding scholarships for underrepresented law students, the very people Crane once excluded. In a twist of poetic justice, Crane's former mansion was repurposed as a community learning center for underprivileged youth. The basketball courts stood where his galas once sparkled. The marble ballroom now held coding workshops. Children laughed where power once whispered. 5 years later, Judge Naomi Carter adjusted her black robes inside the federal courthouse. Her clerk entered with a case file. "Your Honor, Crane versus State, Another appeal motion. Naomi glanced down at the folder, then closed it gently. Denied, she said. Her clerk nodded, smiling. That makes 7. Outside her chambers, the wall bore a simple quote she had written years earlier. Equality isn't a debate, it's a discipline. That evening, Naomi joined Elias on their penthouse balcony. Below them, Atlanta pulsed with progress. Do you ever think about that night? She asked. Elias nodded slowly. Every time I realize what standing up costs and what it pays back. She smiled faintly. He thought drowning me would end my voice. Instead, it carried farther than his name ever will. The skyline glowed as if in applause, a city reborn by consequence, courage, and change. If this story moved you, drop a comment below and tell us where you're tuning in from. If you believe integrity should never bow to prejudice, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more cinematic tales of justice and redemption. Here's a quick question for you. Would you have found the courage to stand up, knowing the cost might be everything you built? Your voice matters because every story like this reminds us that truth, when it finally surfaces, always rises higher than hate.